Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share our recent conversation with Dan Smith. Dan is a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2026, and he is also a future-year scholar. I recently connected with Dan to talk more about his background, his decision to pursue an MBA, what attracted him to the Future Year Scholars Program, how his first year is going, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the Experience Darden podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Dan Smith. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for having me.
It's great to talk with you. How's everything going? How are you doing?
It's going well. The start of Q2 is, off to the races now. We're in the thick of recruiting season for consulting and investment banking, and plus all the academic and social requirements. I'm living by my Outlook calendar at the moment.
Yeah, this quarter two is a very full quarter, particularly not just class, but also with recruitment activities. There's a lot that happens in this quarter, at least it seems like, for the students.
Yes, definitely. Very exciting time seeing, all my friends outside of, my section and learning team at all these different events. It's great to catch up, and, everyone is in the same boat. We all know how brutal it can be.
So what section are you?
I'm section C. So a big Darden Cup event coming up tomorrow, trying to hold on to our 10-point lead at the moment, but I'm sure the other sections might have a different plan.
What's the event?
Cricket.
Okay. Do you know much about cricket?
I do not. I've been informed by some of my international colleagues here about the various forms of the cricket game. We're going to play the shortest version of the game, which is great. I was a soccer player, so have no hand-eye skills. So I will be supporting the other section C'ers from the sideline.
Yeah, cricket matches, I guess, in one of its forms can go on for days. And so I take it that will not be the version that's played in the Darden Cup.
I hope not, yes.
Yeah, I watched it this summer when I was over in Scotland, and I felt like I could kind of follow along. I need somebody to give me a primer on exactly what's going on. It seemed interesting. People were very, very into it. Obviously, it's a huge global sport. So nice to see it show up in the Darden Cup lineup.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you and what's your background?
Yeah, so I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and then went to a small private liberal arts college for undergrad. I was a finance and German major there. Out of undergrad, started at JP Morgan Chase in a strategy role. It was a 2-year rotational program. So after the program finished, I switched to the Chase side. So wanted to get more client exposure from people outside of the bank. So I was in the credit card division to help launch the Instacart and then DoorDash credit cards. A couple years into my role, I got tapped on the shoulder from a colleague at Barclays, and she tempted me to come over to manage a few more portfolios and no more launches, which was fantastic. And that's where I ended before starting at Darden. I also lived somewhat of a second life as a soccer coach. Started as a rec coach my first year in Delaware, and kind of climbed up the ranks and ended as the director of Zone 1, we called it. So basically managing our under 8 through under 12 boys programs. So I coached 3 teams myself, but then manage 8 other coaches, which encapsulate around 250 players and 500 parents by association, which was the hardest part of the job.
Yeah, that's a lot as a side gig, right? It's not your full-time job, although it does sound like a full-time job.
Right. I was only on the field typically 3 days a week, but those days starting work in finance at 8, ending at 5, getting to the field, ending on the field around 9 were pretty long days. But I thought it filled my cup for, the finance side balanced me out. The kids really didn't care what the stresses of the finance world were. They just loved, hanging out with me, learning some new, soccer skills from day to day.
What was your philosophy as a coach?
Yeah, so I kind of went against against the grain a little bit. The youth soccer is very competitive, and teams and clubs really feel evaluated on their win-loss record. The formats change every 2 years. So you start off playing 7v7 and then go to 9v9. And then finally, 4 years later, end up at 11v11, to the true what people see on the television. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in winning 7v7 or 9v9 games. So our curriculum was really focused on loving the ball and being on the ball as much as possible. A lot of 1v1s, 2v2s, max 3v3s, which we didn't win a ton of games, especially in those 7v7 and early 9v9 years. But once everyone is super comfortable on the ball and can almost dribble past the first defender every time, it unlocks a new realm of possibilities. So one of the teams, it's kind of the culmination of this philosophy. By the end of under 12, right before they were about to play 11v11 for the first time, we were able to beat the New York Red Bulls and tie the Philadelphia Union Academy and got up to third in the nation. So that was a great sight for all the younger teams that were going through the trials and tribulations of losing these 7v7 games, just to point the parents in the right direction of like, look, this philosophy works in the long term. Don't try to shortcut it right now.
You and Ted Lasso, not focused on wins and
Yeah,
losses.
yeah. Maybe I was inspired by him. Love the show.
Yeah, it's a great show. How did you decide you wanted to pursue an MBA?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was a part of the Future Year Scholars Program. So I was, put on to the MBA from a professor during my undergrad. He did his PhD in economics at the McIntyre School at UVA. So he let me know that Darden had a deferred admissions program, and I talked to other professors, and they kind of knew me better than I knew myself. I had locked in this role at JP Morgan, thought that was going to be somewhat of a long-term plan for me, stay in banking for the long term. But they kind of knew I would get the itch of a higher academic rigor at some point. So applied to the program, was lucky enough to get accepted, and that gave me between 2 to 5 years to gain work experience and then come back to whichever class of Darden that I wanted to. So I thought that I was going to just do the 2 year rotational program at JP Morgan and come straight back. But about 18 months in, I realized I didn't really know a whole lot and thought I needed a bit more of work experience. And I was loving the soccer aspect of things as well. So deferred the entire 5 years. Knew that I still had room to grow on the soccer side of things, but on the finance had a lot of experience, launching a credit card and then managing some existing portfolios, but felt the time was right for a career change.
It's interesting talking with future scholars. They always ask about how people figure out, the 2 to 5 years you can come to Darden, how you figure out what's the right time for you. It sounds like from a career standpoint, you felt like you would really benefit from working more. Any thoughts on that particular question?
Yeah, I think there's no right or wrong. I have friends through the program that only did 2 years, and they don't seem to be disadvantaged versus the people who went the full 5 years. It actually might be at a slight advantage. They're closer to that school aspect. The people who haven't been around academia for 5 years, the first couple weeks of Q1 is tough getting back into the study and just the quantity of reading. Um, but you kind of know yourself, and bouncing ideas off of your closest friends is helpful. I was talking to a fellow future scholar. He deferred for 4 years, and he brought up to his boss actually of, "Hey, I'm thinking about coming back to school. What are your thoughts?" And his boss kind of pointed him in the right direction. I can maximize, the next 9 months for you to get as much as you need, and then if you're definitely still having these thoughts, punch the ticket and start.
Yeah, I guess it's always nice to know that you have that option. You have that seat at Darden in your back pocket, so to speak.
Yeah, I like to classify it as a golden ticket.
Yeah, good. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka reference there. So, what is it about Darden that appealed to you?
Yeah, obviously grew up in a smaller town, and purposely went to a small private liberal arts college, and knew Charlottesville would be the right spot for me after visiting a few times. Even before interviewing for future scholars, I was able to sit in on a strategy class, and the discussion was so lively. I hadn't seen that in any of my undergraduate classes, and felt really comfortable with the area. It's a small town; everyone knows each other. And in the deferral period, living in Delaware, I felt the same way. Banking in Delaware is a very tight-knit community as well as the soccer side of things. So, that's how I switched from JP Morgan to Barclays. It was actually a soccer connection of a parent that I coached 4 years before that. So, the tight-knit community of Charlottesville is, I think, the differentiator for me.
Had you spent much time in Charlottesville before you came? Was this a completely new experience for you?
I had visited a few times. The Future Scholars program, Catherine and Marav hosted several events, both virtual and in person. And so it was a lovely drive actually down from Delaware, around 4.5 hours. But you go past the Blue Ridge Mountain, it's a lovely drive down. Not a whole lot of traffic. So did a couple 3 to 4 day trips down, longer weekend trips, President's Day, Martin Luther King Day, whenever, we had a holiday coming up. I would try to come down around once a year.
Yeah, it's a nice place to spend some time. You have any favorite things about Charlottesville, things that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, I like the drive in. I live off campus, and am still coaching at a local soccer club. So the community there is really great. One of the parents is a finance professor at McIntyre. So she's kind of filled me in on the tips and tricks of how to get around, what are the hot spots, the places to avoid, long lines on a Friday or Saturday night. Um, I love Burton's restaurant, and then kind of more of the barracks area. Chopped salad is great, and just the downtown mall is great to walk around on a lazy Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, you got lots of options. If you're looking to eat in the Charlottesville area, there are no shortage of restaurants. It's always
Yeah.
amazing. We always ask this kind of question for many of our guests here on the podcast. And what do you like about Charlottesville? And I think, sometimes there's overlap in the restaurants that get mentioned, but oftentimes people are naming different places that they like to go. And I hope our listeners are just compiling a list as they go, because you'll realize there are so many restaurants here in Charlottesville.
Yeah, I hear about new restaurants from friends all the time. Like, oh, what is that? I have a running, notes on my phone of places to check out. So hopefully I'll be able to cover them all in the next 2 years.
So you mentioned coming back to school after being, or in the working world for 5 years, and the adjustment to having class again and homework again. Tell us a little bit more about what that was like. How did you get up to speed? Are you starting to feel settled in now? Where are you in that process?
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm settled in now. But it was tough. I think the biggest benefit was that we have these learning teams. And so my learning team is super diverse. We have a wide variety of backgrounds and future goals and aspirations that we're able to bounce ideas off each other. Our every learning team approaches studying for cases differently. Our team tries to have a primary and a backup. So the primary is leading the discussion on the case, and then the backup is kind of quality control and provides a different perspective if they have one. Everyone reads all of the cases before the discussion starts. So it's really interesting to hear how different people approach problems. Someone on my learning team is a JD MBA student, so she often approaches things from a regulatory or legal perspective. The finance person in me never sees that coming. So it's great in the classroom because you never know how the conversation is going to flow, and seeing the problem from multiple angles is super helpful. The kind of lead up to classes, I was fortunate enough to stop working in May, so kind of had talked to some second year students of what the academic course load is going to be for Q1. And we were able to get most of the cases a couple weeks in advance. So, and that's every quarter we can get an idea of what's going to be the longer reading classes versus the heavy quantitative classes. And so you're able to kind of allocate your time in advance. So having that and bouncing all these things off my learning team really made Q1 much more manageable.
Was working with a learning team, this kind of collaborative approach to school, was that an adjustment for you? Was it different than your undergraduate experience?
Oh, definitely different than undergrad. I was one of the few people in my friend group that was doing the kind of accounting and finance track. So we didn't have very many classes together. But learning team, you're all going through the same courses. Again, the discussion in the classroom can go a myriad ways, but having the background knowledge and a couple good nuggets from each perspective is helpful.
Well, one of the adjustments I assume for almost any student coming to Darden is learning through the case method, particularly in a graduate business setting. How have you found class? Has the case method also been an adjustment for you? What would you share about this aspect of the Darden experience?
It was an adjustment. I love the case method. I don't think many alumni wish that they were lectured to more. So most of my undergraduate experience was lecture based. I was fortunate to take a business strategy class as a capstone to the finance major in undergrad that we read cases from business schools that publish these cases. So it was really a new experience for me learning through the case method. It was around that time that I applied to Future Year Scholars and was sold on this methodology and pedagogy. But it really puts you in the shoes of the protagonist, and it forces you to create and defend a decision. So often, professors will see one perspective and then get sometimes the polar opposite and have two or three camps fighting against each other. We'll have each chalkboard will be devoted to a different school of thought and the pros and cons of each, and just seeing how people attack the problem and would recommend a course of action is really interesting.
You have a favorite case that you've read thus far? I know it's early. It's Q1 or a discussion
Ooh,
that stands out.
that's a great question. I think one of the craziest cases was towards the end of our marketing class. It was about chickens that were given these contact lenses to avoid cannibalization within the chicken coops. And so we had to determine an intrinsic price of these contact lenses that the company should sell it at. Just the background of the case was fascinating, and walking through the analysis of getting a per chicken or per egg value was a wild ride to say the least.
I'm guessing, given your background in finance, credit cards, banks, you had not had much exposure to the poultry business before.
No, no. Delaware does has a lot of chicken production, but that's more in the southern part of the state, so don't have any chicken expertise, unfortunately.
Well, that is one of the benefits of the case method is that you get exposure to all these different industries and companies you may have not had an opportunity to learn about previously. So you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation that you're busy with recruiting activities. And one of the things I'm always interested to ask students about here on the podcast is how have your career goals evolved during your time here at Darden? You mentioned having this background in finance. Still interested in finance? What are you thinking about for your next step?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have kind of existential crises about that every week. Uh, I would say it's definitely changed since applying in 2019 through the Future Scholars Program. One of the admissions essays that I wrote about was pursuing investment banking post MBA. That kind of was crossed off the list through an experience I had at Barclays. We acquired one of our credit card portfolios to bring them in-house, so walked end to end through an entire acquisition deal. Enjoyed the kind of hard finance of it, but then after the deal was done, we had to go through post-merger integration. How are we going to capitalize on certain synergies? And I decided I don't think I want to do that consistently post MBA. So, I knew consulting was probably going to be the most logical step for me. I love the leadership and coaching aspect that I was exposed to over the past 5 years, and pairing that with the finance expertise. But I have these existential crises on long-term versus near-term career goals. I would love in the long term to work in sports, specifically on the soccer side, but definitely understand the value of consulting in the near term. Just the breadth and depth you're able to go on these engagements is unreplicable in one individual company. And then just hearing about all my classmates' prior work experience and where they want to go post Darden is super exhilarating. Entrepreneurship through acquisition is a term I've never even heard of before stepping foot on campus. But hearing, people going that route or launching their own, startup makes me reconsider what my long-term career goals are almost every week.
Yeah, I appreciate your candor here, Dan. I think it's important for prospective students to hear that this is definitely sort of an active, ongoing process for students, even as they're going through the recruiting process. And even as they move into their second year. I've talked to a lot of people here on the podcast that, they go on that summer internship, they come away with some new ideas, new thoughts about what they'd like to do. Maybe it's helped clarify their career goals. I think a lot of people think of this career process as something that has to happen in the first 4 or 5 months of your MBA program. And then that's kind of it. The reality is you've got 2 years to think about it. And then you have, of course, a whole lifetime to also continue to pursue different things. And you have support through alumni career services, et cetera. So this work is not going to stop once you get out of Darden. But I appreciate your candor. I wonder, what are you looking forward to in the months ahead? What are you excited about?
Yeah. So first, probably in the forefront of everyone's mind is landing that prestigious internship. I know the hardest part of the MBA program is starting, but I find it exciting to be in the calm before the storm, especially from the coaching aspect of things. Going through these tough times brings people together in a way that not many other situations can emulate. I went through it with some of my teams, losing those really early 7v7 and 9v9 games, and the parents and the players having uh, no idea, no long-term positivity on what it's going to be. Um, makes a world of a difference once you're able to go through it together. Our strategy professor starts almost every class with, guys, it's going to be okay. You're going to land that internship. I've been here for 18 years. I've seen it been done. So that's kind of on the forefront of I think everyone's mind. But excited to see more of Charlottesville as the recruiting stuff slows down, and it's more interview prep and less of off campus or on campus events. Looking to see more of Charlottesville and get check off all those restaurants on my list.
Who is your strategy professor?
Jared Harris, who is the course lead. Kind of side story. Our first or our second case of Q2 was about Apple, and towards the end of class, once we finally got into the meat and potatoes of Apple, he took off his blazer, had a black turtleneck neck on, and whipped out these little glasses and turned into to Steve Jobs. And no one saw it coming. He got a standing ovation. It was phenomenal.
I love that. Jared always has so much energy. He's a big music fan too. He's periodically will make appearances in the faculty student band. Yeah, he's a
Hmm.
super interesting guy. Lots of
Yeah.
energy. Well, Dan, when you think about, admittedly, you're just a few months in here, but when you think about, pre-MBA, pre-Darden, Dan, to where you are now, do you get a sense of how the program has been impactful for you, or kind of where you are now versus where you were even just a few months ago?
Yeah, definitely. I've learned a lot about myself over the past couple months. I think I was speaking on a Future Scholars panel a couple weeks ago, and the biggest thing for me of pre-Darden versus now is those time management skills. Um, you're going to be pulled in so many different directions that if you don't have a good sense of what's important to you and what you're going to prioritize, it's going to be really difficult for you to have success long term. Also, found out a lot about my leadership style. Leading organizations and leading teams were two of my favorite classes of quarter one that really helped us identify blind spots in our leadership style. And I've been really conscious of that through the coaching that I'm doing at a local club here in Charlottesville, bouncing ideas off my players. You think these 12-year-old boys don't know anything about leadership, but they're actually very intuitive and get things that MBAs don't even see.
So you're able to still continue coaching.
I am. So I'm fortunate to work with another coach from Brazil. So we have a great dichotomy between the German game that I was playing in and the Brazilian flair. So we're this yin and yang that a lot of other teams don't see coming. So he and I kind of pass off sessions. So whatever I'm able to come to each week, I'll lead the majority of the session. But when I'm not available, he'll take over. And he's been great to handle most of the away games. Since we're in kind of a unique spot here in Virginia, have to travel a lot for our away games. But we coach together for all the home games.
Some of our listeners less familiar with soccer may be wondering what's the big difference between German approach and the Brazilian approach? How would you describe that?
Yeah, the German approach loves possession, loves keeping the ball, loves these short to mid range passes, while the Brazilian game is more individual creativity on the ball, dribbling, kind of try to humiliate defenders while scoring beautiful goals. I don't know if beautiful is in the German vocabulary.
I did not know about the sort of the goal of the Brazilian sort of trying to make your opponent feel well, not so great.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. So, well, Dan, last question for you. Any piece of advice you would share with our listeners, something you would encourage them to think about as they think about their own MBA journeys?
Yeah, definitely. So, kind of two-pronged, speaking to two different, distinct groups here. For future scholars interested in the program, definitely apply. There's almost no downside risk to applying, and as I said before, you could be walking away with this golden ticket. On the more traditional MBA applicants, my biggest thing is that you can't emulate the critical skills, both soft skills and kind of hard technical skills in the working world. We're able to create this low stakes environment in the classroom and through clubs and various resources that you're not able to get in the working world, and is going to help you down the line. I think a lot of the classes that you take will have either an immediate impact or a long-term impact. So your finance classes, your banking classes, your econ classes will be great for the immediate post MBA goal of landing that great job that you want. But our leading leadership classes, leading teams, leading in organizations. I'm really interested in Q4 taking this class called At Your Best, that goes into kind of nutrition. I think that's going to be super beneficial down the line, once you're not as focused on the details day to day, and leading teams, having a group of people reporting to you. These more soft skills classes are going to pay dividends 10, 15, 20 years down the line.
Yeah, we just had a panel discussion up here in Roslyn, gosh, a couple weeks ago, and one of the panelists was saying, I hate this term soft skills because when I think about the stuff that I use for my MBA education on a day-to-day basis, it's leading organization stuff, the stuff that I learned in my LO class or leadership communication class or the ethics class, these kind of things that maybe people think of more as sort of the soft skill end of knowledge that you acquire in business school, but like you're working with people every day, businesses in a social context. Like that is the stuff that really has value for people as they're sort of moving into more managerial leadership positions. Not to say that the finance, accounting, and harder end of things is not useful. It absolutely is. But if you think about what your day to day looks like as you get further up in an organization, it's a lot more people work.
Right, exactly. You're going to be a part of a team in almost any career path that you go down. You can't really do anything yourself.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time. And it's great speaking with you today. And best of luck here as you navigate the recruitment process and finish up Q2.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks again for having me. Look forward to speaking again in the future.
And that was my conversation with Dan Smith, a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2026. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.